Hello and thanks for joining School of the American Rifle. Today's video is about my favorite 22 rimfire AR-15s, the Smith & Wesson M&P 1522. Before anyone gets upset about this endorsement, if you will, we purchased these with our own money. We were not donated parts, we were not gifted anything. This is my own opinion based on working on these as a gunsmith, as an armor. There's lots of options on the market for rimfire ARs. I just have an affinity for these. I guess our cat Rebel is going to join the video. Rebel, come on over here. Nah, not yet. He'll make an appearance though. But these are rifles that we purchased. These two over here for our two youngest sons, Tristan and Gabriel. We purchased these for Project Appleseed. We're going to take them to their first event. It's going to be my first event as well. My rifle is here, which is an older model. It's about 10 years old. My two boys' rifles are set up identical. Mine's a little bit different. But I'm going to go over the modifications we've made, any enhancements we've done, and the parts we added to them, and try to explain why we did it. If rimfire ARs are not your thing, then this video is probably not for you, and that's okay. But a lot of people asked about this when I made a post, and we decided to go ahead and make a video. So, as I said, these are mainly for Project Appleseed, but we will be using these for plinking, just having fun. So let's talk about my two boys' rifles first. In the background, we have two rifle bags. Project Appleseed says that you should have some type of cover. Rebel's checking them out. Should have some type of cover to put the rifles in case there's inclement weather. So, to keep things AR historic, we're going to add these M16 rifle cover bags. And for the magazines, we also added two magazine bags that are more modern, and then one older one, which is Vietnam style. I can't read the writing, but these were used in Vietnam to try to get people to defect over to our side. So we're going to put the 22 magazines in those. If there's inclement weather, we'll put the rifles in those bags. And since this is mainly Project Appleseed and it's based on Revolutionary War history, had to throw a little bit of love to my Conduct of a Gentleman patch. It's paying homage to the movie The Patriot, which is not historically accurate, but one of my favorite movies. There's Rebel. Hey, Rebel cat. Chunky boy. You haven't been in a video in a while, you big jerk. So let's go ahead and go over the things that we added to the guns, and then we'll talk about the modifications. So my boys' rifles, they have the factory stock. We kept those because they have the factory swivel attachment, so we can use a GI sling. Why a GI sling? Because Project Appleseed teaches you to use a cotton GI sling, the cuff around your arm, and that's what we went with. We have a front Q.D. attachment point with a forward controls design Q.D. attachment. Going back to the buttstock again, we have some makeshift cheek rests. We added some exercise mat pad with some Gorilla Tape or duct tape. And that's so we can get a good cheek weld so they don't have any parallax issues with their optics. Moving up to the optics, we have Sig Sauer 1 to 10 LPVO optics. These come with a base. They run about $500 retail. Quite pricey for a 22, but we wanted to give them some decent optics for their guns. From the top back, we also added these next level armament extended charging handles. I'm going to roll it up and show you basically how they work. They're nice and beefy so you can get around the optic. They work really good. We haven't had any issues. We were initially going to buy some Raptor charging handles, but they haven't been made for the 1522 in quite some time. So we picked these up, and they've been working great. My only advice for these would be make sure that you lube up the charging handle really well. If they're dry, sometimes it'll cause issues with the bolt not wanting to close, loading a fresh magazine and using the bolt catch. If they're lubed up, no problem at all. The stocks have been tightened up on the inside of them. Let me see if I can pull this off. On the inside, we added Velcro right here, the hard side of Velcro. And what that did is, without replacing the stock with something more pricey and something that didn't have the sling swivel, it tightens everything up nice and solid so there's no wiggle. So just a poor man's way to tighten things up without replacing the furniture. We have BCM grips. We had to make a modification here because of the integrated trigger guard, but We like those grips. The grips are what are on their 5.56 AR-15, so we're trying to keep sort of the same form factor, if you will. For triggers, they're running the LaRue MBT2s. Fantastic trigger, whether it be a centerfire gun or a rimfire, they work great on the 1522s. We did upgrade the hammer and trigger pins. These are not the pins that come with the LaRues. The LaRue pins, if you put them in or any other AR-15 pin, they're slightly shorter in the 1522 because the receiver is bulkier. So if you don't use the pins that come with it, they might walk out on you because they don't have as much surface contact. That being said, those are made by Geissele. They are for the Colt 901. They're slightly longer, and they're a great addition to these guns. Some of the early 1522s had shorter pins, typical AR-15 pins, and one of the reasons they were actually banned from Project Appleseed is because they were having an out-of-battery detonation issue due to Headspace, and they were having hammer and trigger pins walk, and I suspect them being short was one of the reasons. The newer ones all come with longer pins, so I'm not sure if that was something Smith & Wesson did to remove issues or just to make it more cosmetically attractive. But we put these in here to keep the pins tight because Geissele and LaRue pins are .001 oversized from factory pins. So if you use the factory Smith & Wesson pins with a LaRue trigger, you get more slop. Trigger pull doesn't feel as good. Let's go a little bit more into the gun again. Magazine button. These are Geissele's. We had a bag of them. And these, again, are on my boy's centerfire gun, so we decided to put the Geissele buttons on them. We covered the pins inside the gun. Right here, the extractor. These are made by Volquartsen. These are aftermarket changes. Your gun doesn't need it unless you have reliability issues, extraction issues, but just to get ahead of any problems, we went ahead and added those. I think they're about $12 or $15. It's good insurance. They're a good part. The cat decides he wants to talk too. Hey, Rebel, come here. Come here. You got dirt all over you now. He doesn't want to be in the video. All right, USGI Sling and the triggers. So let's move over to mine. Couple modifications that are different. This is an older one, so the rail is a quad rail. I have an older optic on a LaRue 104 mount, and I have an older Leopold 1-4 LPVO. So I use that. I have Magpul Pro sights on it because that's what I use on some of my 5.56 carbines. Same pistol grip, same stock setup, same magazine release button, but I'm also using a Geissele trigger because that's what's on my 5.56 guns. My boys have LaRues in theirs. So some slight variations. I had to use a different sling attachment because I have a quad rail. This is a Troy. Still using the Magul Q.Ds. Up front, things are much different. I have a maul, which my wife bought for me. I have a cloud defensive light, and I have an SWR suppressor on it. Why do I have this on the 22 that I'm going to use for Project Appleseed? Well, you're supposed to train with things that you're comfortable with. So if I'm going to take a class on how to become a better rifleman, I want to use a gun that's sort of laid out the same way. To me, that makes sense. This is the reason why we're using the 1522 instead of the 1022, which most people in Appleseed use, because it's a different factor or form, and we wanted to keep everything the same. They're used to AR, so we're going to stay with ARs for Appleseed. Pulled my stock piece off, seat piece off. I need to tape those on a little bit better. This tape isn't cooperating. But that's my gun. Yeah, there's a lot of money on that. These aren't going to stay on here. They're just going to be for the Appleseed event. And then I'll put them back onto my centerfire gun. The suppressor normally lives on this. Let's get into the modifications. So, modifications, we did a lot. Of course, since I'm a gauge nut, we gauged everything on these guns. We gauged the throat erosion, muzzle erosion, chamber function, which is diameter. We checked headspace. We checked the low receiver bores, hammer, trigger, all those types of things. They were good. The one thing that did fail horribly, though, was the selector bore and my boys' two guns. We could not even move the safeties or the selectors out of the box. And if you'll know now, they move nice and clean. Very, very nice. I actually had to take one of my reamers that we use on our 5.56 receivers and open the hole up to .375 so they wouldn't bind anymore. So yeah, warranty's voided, but it had to be done because they could not manipulate the safeties. It was not safe. No pun intended. Let's see. We check bolt travel. When you put a aftermarket trigger in a rimfire AR, you want to make sure that the bolt actually cocks the hammer down properly. Just making sure that they have the right amount of travel and the right amount of camming mechanism for the hammer that's being used. Lower bores, headspace. We check fire and pin protrusion. We lap the barrels. Sometimes rimfire barrels can be a little bit rough, so we lap the barrels so they take less break-in, if you will. We recrown the muzzles. We remove the muzzle devices, and they actually have GI caps on them. We'll get a little bit close to it, but these come off. They're shoot-off caps. These are government issue. And actually, the last time we went to the range, my son forgot it was on there, and he shot it off the gun, so they work great. He still has it. But these muzzle devices, if they're over-torqued, whether a 5.56 or a 22, they can affect accuracy. So we took the muzzle devices off and we retorqued them to 5 foot-pounds, and we used Vibrotite VC3, and that's something I would normally use on a 5.56, but since these aren't going to get that hot, we wanted to keep the torque value low because that can affect your accuracy. Okay. Let's see, we removed the caps and the rails. I don't have them installed, but when you buy these, they're not free floated. There's a cap here. So we took those out to free float the rail. You just pop them out. It's a little plastic doodad that goes in there. We bedded the barrels. We took the guns apart. We bedded the barrels into the receiver. Some people consider that a controversial thing, but we wanted to make sure that the barrels were as rigid as possible in this plastic upper receiver. They do have a steel insert in them, but we wanted to make things tight. We did feed ramp work. Let me see if I can get a good picture of this. They're nice and shiny. That assists with feeding. We tuned the ejectors. It's not going to be a good shot, but basically they're mirror finished just to make sure they feed good. The ejectors on these are fixed, so you want to make sure that they sit as high as possible and as close into the center line of the bolt as possible without binding anything up. So sometimes you got to bend them upwards, downwards, inwards, outwards to make them right, and that makes sure they eject cleanly. Let's see, we fixed the stock rattle. We did our cheek pieces. We tuned the ejector. Yep, we talked about that. Torque. The front sights. Since Appleseed is a proponent of using iron sights, in case we have to switch over, I modified the front sights, and they have a point on them instead of that standard squared notch. They're very, very, very pointed now. There we go. So it has a more precise aiming point if they have to switch over to irons. It's not a Q.D. mount, but we can pull those off real quick. As far as accuracy goes, these things are shooting great after the rebuilds. These are my boys' targets. This is Gabriel. 3 shots on each target. This is a 22 long rifle. Like I said, this is at 25 meters. And this is Tristan's target. 3 shots on each one. So these are shooting right at about a minute of angle if you take 25 yards and times it by 4. Some of the groups are a little bit bigger. They had some flyers. Sometimes they were pulling their shots. It was a cold day, so they had a good time. They feel very confident with their rifle. So hopefully, if everything works out, my boys will earn the rifleman badge. But the main purpose is to get some American history, get some rifle training, and have a good day with my boys. Here comes Rebel again. Rebel, you gonna come walk across these guns? There we go. Big old chunky boy. So let's see if I missed anything. Modifications, rail covers, nope. All right. So, as always, I hope you find this video educational, and thanks for watching.